me know if the recording is working. Is it all right? Because when I'm sort of standing up at the beginning of this to get this going. All right, members, everybody all set? All right, good evening, everybody. It is just about 6 o'clock. We are here at the Rockingham County Superior Court in Brentwood, New Hampshire. This is a public input session for the New Hampshire Special Committee on Redistricting of the House of Representatives. And before we get going, this is official court business. I'm going to ask if people would rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for those of you here with us tonight for attending this community input session. This is being audio and video recorded to be subsequently placed online and made publicly available. I understand it is also being live streamed, which you can access from the New Hampshire House of Representatives website. As you can see, this is not a typical House or Senate meeting. This is a joint meeting. Not all members of each committee are present. But before we begin introductions, I would like to say, as I mentioned, we are here at the Brentwood County Superior Courthouse. We are here with the permission of the Superior Court and others involved in the administration of this court and the ownership of the building. And I'm not sure whether in Rockingham if that includes the county commissioners or not, but they're certainly aware. Please understand that that the Superior Court, or the court system of New Hampshire, and I'm referring to this as the Superior Court, this is the family court and the Superior Court for Brentwood, for Rockingham County, but the courts have nothing to do with this process. They don't know what we're talking about. I don't know that they have any idea that this meeting is actually really occurring outside of the administration office. They have been very accommodating to us to allow us to use this. It has good parking and is fairly central for Rockingham County. So we thank the court system of New Hampshire for letting us use this facility, but again, they have absolutely nothing to do with the process and have had no input whatsoever in regards to the process itself. How was that, Judge Lynn? Excellent. I have a former judge here on the panel who wanted to also make sure I did that right. All right, so the first thing I want to do is let you know who we have here tonight. As I said, we have the Senate and the House. The Senate is conducting its own hearing. The House is conducting a hearing. And with us is Senator Gray, who is chair of the Senate Committee on Redistricting. And so I'd like to recognize Senator Gray and ask him to introduce the Senate members with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Senate rules don't allow cheering or booing, that kind of things. That's inappropriate for the venue that we're in. The maps that you saw in the big posters outside, again, the way we take testimony is things that we can get as handouts, so we do have handouts. I believe that the House Committee got those last week and the Senators got them today. So taking care of those. And today what we have is Senator Susie and Senator Birdsell, if you want to say anything. Okay. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Senator Gray, and thank you, Senators, for joining us. My name is Barbara Griffin. I'm a representative from the town of Goffstown, and I'm going to my left are members of the House of Representatives Special Committee on Redistricting, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Representative Turcott to my left.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Len Turcott from the town of Barrington, Stratford, District 4. I serve on this committee and also the Finance Committee, Labor Committee, and a senior advisor in the House Majority Office.
Good evening. My name is Wayne McDonald. I live here in Rockingham County. I represent District 5, which is the town of Londonderry. I also serve as Vice Chairman of the Election Law Committee in the House, along with being on this committee.
Hi, good evening. My name is Bob Lynn. I'm a representative from Wyndham, that's Rockingham District 7, and I serve on the Finance Committee, Division 2.
Good evening, I'm Paul Bergeron. Thank you. I'm Paul Bergeron, representing Hillsborough District 29, which is Nashua Ward 2. And in addition to serving on this committee, I serve on House Election Law.
Good evening, I'm Marjorie Smith. I represent Durham and Madbury in Stratford County, and I serve on the House Judiciary Committee in addition to this committee.
Good evening and thank you for coming. My name is Lucy Weber. I represent Cheshire District 1, which is the Connecticut River towns of Walpole, Westmoreland, Chesterfield, and Hinsdale. So I'm very glad to come over to the other side of the state. And I also serve on the Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee. And Madam Chair, although I know we have covered this before, I'm going to say that I am still very saddened that we do not have remote participation for either committee members or members of the public.
Hi, I'm Connie Lane. I'm from Ward 2 in Concord, and I'm on the House Election Law Committee as well as this committee. And I think we've been joined by another senator.
I am aware of that. Thank you, representatives. Senator Gray, did you want to introduce the latest entry to our panel here this week?
Senator Rebecca Perkins-Boca has just arrived.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Rebecca Perkins-Boca. I represent District 21, which is Portsmouth, Durham, Newmarket, and the surrounding towns. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to begin to hear from you in regards to the redistricting process that we are undertaking in the House. The number of people have signed up. There should still be a sign-up sheet outside. I'm going to go through this list in order, and then we'll get the sheet with the second page of people who have signed up to speak. If you have written testimony, you can either pass it over to Christina Dyer, who's our support staff with us tonight, or on the right to Representative Lane, and we'll make sure that it gets to all members and into the file. And when you come up to speak, I'm going to ask that you come to the dais right there with the microphone, and you'll be standing right where the lawyers do in connection with court. So welcome to the courtroom 6 of the Superior Court. So the first person to sign up is Jane Armstrong from Exeter.
Good evening. My name is Jane Armstrong, and I'm a resident of Exeter here in Rockingham County. I'm concerned about a fair, nonpartisan, and transparent redistricting process. This evening, however, I would like to speak to just one piece of the process, but an important one. This topic is ensuring that every eligible town has its own district. In New Hampshire, we're very proud of our unique legislature of 400 representatives. We talk about how it enables us to meet our representatives in our daily lives, shopping at transfer stations and town events. This is why, in 2006, we voted to pass the constitutional amendment which says that when a town population is within a reasonable deviation from the ideal population, which this year, 2020, is 3,444, that town shall have its representative, shall have its own district. So now, giving towns of 3,444 their own representative is enshrined in our Constitution. Here in Rockingham County, 14 towns were eligible in 2010 for their own district, House district, with a 2010 number of 3,192, but they were denied it. These include Atkinson, Auburn, Candia, Chester, Deerfield, Greenland, Kingston, Hampstead, Newmarket, Nottingham, Plastow, Rye, Sandown, and Seabrook. I'm asking you to give these towns and others in the state what the New Hampshire Constitution guarantees them. They deserve to have representatives who live in town, representatives who know the people and the issues. I also wonder why, if it was so hard in 2010, why has nothing been done to make the legislative and constitutional changes to fix this problem? The legislature has had 10 years. I suspect that it's possible there are some who don't want to fix it. I understand that the math makes it hard to get every eligible town its own district. But surely you can make the effort to get these towns the representation they deserve and are entitled to receive. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to ask that you, no applause, please.
Now,
Thank you.
I said I didn't have written testimony, but I'm going to...
Feel free to give it to us and we'll make sure that a copy gets
Okay, thank you.
into the record.
Just put it right on the table.
Oh, yeah, just put it right on
For
the
those
table.
For those that just came in, I'm Senator Gray. I'm the chair of the Senate portion of this. Clapping, booing are not appropriate in this hearing. Okay, so I appreciate your cooperation.
Stephen Bourne. Welcome.
Thank you. Stephen Bourne, Rye. This is from our Bill of Rights, ratified in 1798. It's Article 10. Government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or emulation of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted and public liberty manifestly endangered, all other means of redress are ineffectual. The people may and right ought to reform the old, to establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and the happiness of mankind. So I'm sure you all know that. So I just want to talk about a couple of the phrases in here. All right? When all other means of redress are ineffectual, that means we need to put in the effort to try to make things right and to get the government to represent the people. So for the last 20 years, we've lived under gerrymandering. And by the way, it is Gary. It's named after Albert Gary, and that's how you pronounce his name. And we need to try to fix that. Now, $100 a year is not much, so we greatly appreciate the time to drive around to all the different counties and listen to people. And it's an incredible first step. It's the right thing to do, to listen to people and understand what we think is broken. All right, but the most important step is the second step. And that comes once you start coming up with a first proposal, to make sure the people have the time to look at it and make sure there's not even the slightest suspicion of any gerrymandering. As you just heard, Rye is one of the 74 towns that put forth a petition or motion saying that we want our town leaders to let the New Hampshire General Court know that we expect an open and transparent process with no gerrymandering. Now, I don't think you've heard from the town leaders of Rye saying that that's what the people voted for. I don't see them here. I just spoke to Representative Grote. She hasn't heard from them. So it's hard. We're trying. We're trying to get through that. This is not, gerrymandering is not what the people of New Hampshire, at least the 74 people that went through the effort of getting that warrant article passed. Oh, and by the way, the selectmen didn't support it in Rye. So the second part I wanted to talk about was emulant of any one man, family, or class of men. Now, emulant, I had to look it up the first time I read this. It means to benefit. And I think we can agree that the class of men is a political party. Now, I've been reaching out to Bill Gardner and Dave Scanlon. They haven't told me, but maybe they'll tell you. How much does the state pay for the the primaries every 2 years for the parties? You should know that number because it's our money. All right. Also, you need to look at what the towns and cities spend on that election every 2 years. On top of that, our town, we voted one of the schools. They closed the other school. So it's a lost day of education. It's a big investment that the people of New Hampshire are paying for. And when it's benefiting a class of men or the political party, it's going against our Constitution. And we just heard from the previous speaker, Rye is also one of those towns. The census says we've got 5,400 people. We've had that for a while. November, we had over 6,000 people who voted. A lot of those were the 20-year-olds that moved back. I don't think it was quite 600. But with the 0.7 miles on Route 1 with almost every parcel being developed in the next few years, we'll soon be at the 6,800 to have 2 reps. We don't even have one. All right? We share one with Newcastle. Now, Newcastle, as Rebecca can probably tell you, it's just Senator Cowell Perkins, that Newcastle probably has a lot more in common with the south end of Portsmouth. All right? We probably have more in common with Northampton. But Northampton's extra people got thrown in one of those Fortella districts with 4 or 5 other districts. So there's another example that can be happening. Now, I don't really like either party, to be honest with you. I spend a lot of my time trying to fix democracy. And if you look around, I don't see a lot of younger people here, do you? Do you ever wonder why? Why they don't participate, why they don't get involved? You know, I think a good example is, I don't know, any 20-somethings ever said, okay, boomer, to you? Do you know what, really, if you ever talk to them and ask them what that really is about?
Mr. Bourne, just keep in mind, we have a number of people signed up to speak tonight, and this is about the redistricting process.
Just
Thank
about
you.
done, last
Okay.
couple Sundays. So what they mean by that is that when we're talking down at them, they're looking back at us and saying, who are you to tell me what to do? Forget about climate change. Look at democracy. It's a mess. You guys have made a mockery of it. It's a money-driven process. The party primaries, 30%, somebody can win with 30% of the votes, 70% of the people will prefer someone else. We have to pick between the 2 people. And then we've got gerrymandering. All right? And no wonder why they're checked out. They don't want to get involved. Now is our opportunity to make some difference. It took a long time for everything to get this messed up, but we can you have the opportunity now to put things in the right direction. All right? If the job's done right and we do what the citizens want, there won't be a single sniff iota of gerrymandering. That should be the goal. Should look at those maps and no one should question or even doubt that there's any gerrymandering that happened in Hampshire. That's what the people want. That's a step to take to try to make our democracy work better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I am gonna ask people to leave if they're clapping. We've made 2 announcements now. We ask that everybody be respectful of everyone who speaks, and that means reacting the same, and we ask it to be with respectful silence, having considered the comments of everyone. We have had another representative join us since we began taking public comment. Representative, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Israel Piedra, representing Hillsborough District 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And next up, we have Bonnie Cameron.
Hi, it's Bernie Cameron.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for clarifying.
That's all right. So I want to address something that can happen and does happen when towns are not allowed to have their own district and their own state representative. I've lived in Deerfield since 1972. Up until 2002, Deerfield had its own House district and its own state representative. He or she was a resident of Deerfield. He knew Deerfield well. He understood the issues that were affecting our town, and he was an active contributor to the community. He was well respected in Deerfield. He was chosen by the people of Deerfield to be their representative. That's the way it always had been. That is no longer the case. Since 2002, our state representatives have been chosen by the majorities in our multi-district, our multi-town district, not necessarily by a majority of Deerfield residents. For example, we have had individuals run repeatedly for Deerfield town offices, such as school board, select board, and each time these individuals have lost those elections. They are well known in town, and they are not elected to these positions. And yet, these same individuals go on to become our state representatives. Why? Because they are not known in the other towns in our district. They are elected based solely on their party, rather than their accomplishments or their integrity. This is not right. And this is what Deerfield is facing now. It is time to return to our town of Deerfield, our constitutional right to have our own single district and a state representative that is chosen by our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Fred McGarry.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Fred McGarry, and I'm a member of the Deerfield Board of Selectmen. And the board has authorized me to speak tonight on its behalf to the Special Committee on Redistricting. At the annual town meeting election held this year, was delayed to June, the town voted 477 to 233, urging the legislature to ensure fair and effective representation of New Hampshire voters and to minimize multi-seat districts. The New Hampshire Constitution, Part 2, Article 11 states, when the population of any town or ward, according to the latest federal census, is within a reasonable deviation from the ideal population for one or more representative seats, the town or ward shall have its own district of one or more representative seats. The 2020 population of Deerfield was 4,855, well in excess of the population requirement of 3,445, which I think I got wrong, it's 300,444, for each representative in New Hampshire. The Deerfield Board of Selectmen received petitions from over 80 voters calling for the board to advocate for Deerfield's own representative district. Each member of the committee has a packet with a copy of those petitions. After the August 2nd meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the board voted unanimously to urge the Special Committee on Redistricting to establish a representative district exclusive to Deerfield. The Deerfield Board of Selectmen concurs with the vote at the annual meeting and the petitions it received and urged the Redistricting Committee to establish a representative district specific to Deerfield. Thank you for this opportunity to provide my testimony. I'd like to thank the committee for holding this public hearing and providing New Hampshire residents, citizens, the opportunity to offer input into the redistricting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGarry. Next, Virginia Clifford, please.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, thank you for holding this session. My name is Virginia Clifford, and I live in Candia, and we don't have anyone in the House from Candia. And so I think people so far are speaking to the same issue that I have a concern for. I vote for 4 people. We select 3 people from District 2, and we vote for, and we vote for 1 person from District 32. None of them live in Candia. Of the 4, 3 live in Deerfield and 1 lives in Nottingham. So as other speakers have already stated, I think it would be very beneficial to Candia to have a representative in the House of Representatives. And reflecting on this, I guess just one comment I would make, sort of from my own point of view and maybe an editorial perspective, is we have too much partisanship. And if I were to vote from someone from Candia, I wouldn't really be considering, and maybe I should, but is this person a Republican or a Democrat? I would be saying, has this person been a selectman? Has this person worked at the polls? What has this person done to contribute to the civic responsibility of the town. So again, I really would appreciate having a representative for the town of Candia, and we have almost 4,000 people now. We're just shy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. June Fabry from Exeter.
Hello. I've lived in Exeter, which is part of Senate District 23, for more than 7 years. I'm testifying at this hearing because I feel that Senate District 23 fails to properly represent me due to a partisan advantage for Republicans in my district. This gerrymandering is subtle but significant. Since we are in the process of redistricting, I'd like to see the new legislative lines drawn in a nonpartisan way instead of continuing to favor Republicans. The process that I've noticed goes like this. My district has been designed so that the number of Democrats in the district are just enough to almost, but not quite, win elections. As a result, for instance, in the 2020 election, the large number of Democratic votes, including my own, have been essentially wasted because our votes have not been converted into seats. In a 2016 article, New Hampshire Public Radio describes their election research when one party consistently loses by thin margins. An efficiency gap that calculates wasted votes develops. Diluting the Democratic votes this way makes my district and others less competitive. My voice and those of other Democrats have not been represented in Concord by the Republicans who have been elected in the past. When this process happens across many districts, the partisan disadvantages for Democrats multiplies, resulting in huge numbers of Democrats losing proper representation in Concord. Now is the time to right this wrong. It is the time to redistrict in a nonpartisan way.
Thank you. Representative Joe Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators. I'd like to, I'm a state rep in District 13, and I'm also a selectman in Hampstead. And I'd just like to, just a little input from, as far as the town of Hampstead is concerned. We are in a district with Kingston, and we have 4 reps, and we bend over backwards as a community to make sure that we can have 2 from Kingston and 2 from Hampstead. And even though both towns have increased in population, we're all pushing 9,000 each, that may give you some agita when you start to set up the districts. But and then I would also like to say that in my opinion, and I served on this committee back in the 90s, and it was done a little bit different. I like to compliment the commission for the openness of the process now, the going to each one of the counties. I think that's great. Using the wherewithal we have to get our message across is great. So all those things are good, and I think that's important, because today we're talking about being open and about when we're doing our business. And I suggest that that's probably the most important thing we have to concern ourselves with every 10 years, and that is that we're transparent. And I would suggest to you that because of the process, it's very difficult to be more transparent than you already are. But I think that every effort should be made to be transparent. The other thing I think is a concern, I think you're set up to fail. The guidelines and the goals that you have in redistricting sets you up in the House side to fail. You cannot do your job without failing some communities. It's just the way it is. We talked about gerrymandering. Now, that's a nice word that came from Massachusetts, where I come from originally. But what is gerrymandering? Gerrymandering assumes that you're making decisions based on strictly politics. And I submit to you that that's not the case. I know most of the members on this committee, and I know that there's enough strong votes on both sides that make sure that the real gerrymandering is never done. But the impression is that it's gerrymandering because of the rules and regulations you have. And I would suggest that unless you change those rules, that's going to continue. And I suggest to you also that in order to make the system more transparent and more comfortable, that we take a real hard look at what's being proposed in many areas, and that is that we change the makeup of your commission. Unless we change the nature of your commission or change the rules, and the rules are harder to change, I think we're going to continue to do this, and I commend you for doing a job with the chance that it's just going to be impossible for you to make everybody happy, and I hope that if there's anything you can do, particularly in supporting, because I think it's bipartisan, supporting the concept that we change the commission, that we have an equal Republican, equal Democrat, and probably with an unequal citizen participation that's being advocated, that's the answer to solve some of the problems we're having tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next signed up, I have Chris Munns from Hampton.
Madam Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Chris Munns. I served as a state representative representing Hampton between 2012 and 2014. I was also a candidate for the state senate in District 24. I know what a commitment of time and energy this is for you, and I'd like to thank you all for your service. There's nothing more central to our representative democracy than voters believing the process they must follow to elect their representatives is transparent and fair. To that end, I thank you for the opportunity you are giving individuals throughout New Hampshire to share their input with you. I hope the decisions you make will reflect the input you have received. It is unfortunate, however, that given the recent increases in COVID cases across the state, you chose not to provide an option for the public to testify remotely. I urge you to reconsider that decision and to add that flexibility to the remaining listening sessions you have scheduled. In light of the comments made by the chairman of the New Hampshire Republican Party that maps will be manipulated so as to favor his party, it is essential that you not only renounce those statements, but that you commit to holding another round of hearings after the maps are drawn, so that the public has a chance to provide you with their input, and so that you can demonstrate that the process used to draw those maps was indeed fair. To give the public enough time to provide you with meaningful input, the public needs at least 10 days' notice of all future public hearings. The two best litmus tests of whether the process is fair will be what you decide to do with our 2 congressional districts and 5 executive council districts. There have been minimal changes in population between the existing congressional districts, and the changes to the maps of those districts should be very minimal. It will be telling, however, if you adopt a map that either bisects Manchester or proposes to move it from Congressional District 1 to Congressional District 2. Executive Council District 2 is currently one of the best examples of gerrymandering anywhere in the country. It and the other Executive Council districts need to be redrawn so that they better represent communities of shared interest and the partisan balance that exists within the state. Failure to do so will cast doubt on the whole redistricting process. That same principle, grouping communities together who have shared interests, should guide how state senate districts are drawn. In District 24, for example, Newton has more in common with Plastow currently in District 22, than it does with Newcastle, which has much more in common with Portsmouth, which is currently in District 21. You need to end the practice of creating safe Republican and safe Democratic districts. Wherever possible, every town with more than 3,500 residents should have at least one state representative representing just that town, and we should minimize the number of flotarial districts. Where a flotarial district is necessary, the principle of grouping communities with shared interests should be followed there as well. Hampton Falls, which currently shares 3 seats with Seabrook, has less in common with Seabrook than, for example, Kensington. And Northampton, which currently shares a seat with Newington and Portsmouth, has less in common with those 2 towns than it does Greenland or Stratham. Finally, as a former state representative from Hampton, I would be remiss if I did not say that as a town with almost 16,000 people, we should have at least 4 state representatives representing just Hampton. Thank you again for your time this evening, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. I also have signed up to speak. Ken Hagar. And I apologize, I think I probably mispronounced your last name.
It can be pronounced a dozen different ways. Thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've been sitting back there, and my opening has probably changed a half a dozen times. But it always comes back to one thing. This would not be my preferred method of redistricting. I would have an independent body made up, in fact, I would follow what Mr. Guthrie said, of an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and augmented by a group of citizens, because you need an odd number in order to get a majority of one side or the other. I don't know any of you, except for Representative Bergeron. I'm going to assume you're all fair-minded people. But I've been living in Rockingham County for more than 40 years, and I know some reps who are anything but fair-minded, and that's the people I'm afraid of. We can talk all we want about the criteria. In fact, I'm not an expert. I'm not sure there is any expert on redistricting, because there are so many criteria that can go into it, it's like peeling an onion. The gentleman just spoke before me about this town having something in common with that town. What does that mean? Shared school district? Shared water departments? I don't know what that means. I do know that the worst criteria is political, based on party affiliation. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen here. Mr. Munns talked about, I didn't even know how bad the Executive Council of District 2 was until I saw it on a map. And I thought, you know, when I'm in power, that's what's going to happen. So let me just give you just a little anecdote that may or may not have any relevance here. I used to coach a lot of rec sports when I was a kid, and soccer especially, you always had trouble getting enough kids to play the game. So you show up and there's supposed to be 11 and the other team would have 9, or I would have 9, he'd have 11. And the overwhelming majority of the time, we adjusted our rosters to play evenly. If he had 9, I would play 9. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen here. Just because you're in a position of power, because you're in a position of majority, doesn't mean that you can't be fair. Because the table is going to turn someday, and you're going to be on the losing side. And one game we played, the opposite coach decided to play his 11 against my 8, and we got beat. And I was coaching 12-year-olds at the time. And they were old enough to know that that wasn't fair. And when we played that team later in the season at even strength, we swamped them. And the reason was because my kids remembered that they hadn't played fair, and it gave them extra motivation. So you Democrats, Republicans, whoever is in the majority at a particular time when these decisions are made, has to remember that it's going to turn. The tide is going to turn someday. You're not going to be in a position of majority. And I just hope that the opposite side is fair if you've been fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Harriet Katie has signed up to speak.
I
I'm not going to accuse anybody of gerrymandering, having served on election law when we had to divide the state up. And I know I certainly didn't. The other thing is, to people here, whether they remember it or not, the last redistricting was done by the courts. And they joined us. However, they decided, I don't know. So I look at it that what I would love to have is every town represented. I realize we don't have that in our Constitution. We have up to 400 House members, 24 senators. What I do want to see, is it possible a state rep? In my town, for years, we had Roger King, of whom one of the previous speakers spoke. And anybody could talk to Roger. That's what I want. A legislator I can talk with and have them hear my point of view, see my point of view, and tell me why they don't support me. And I have had that, and I like that. When I was a state rep, I represented Nottingham, Northwood, Deerfield, Candia. And I made an effort once a month to go to each town and talk with the town. Nottingham was fantastic. We had people ask us would we would come on Sunday, and Vic Bicknell and I would go over one Sunday a month and take any question they had on what was going on in the legislature. Other towns we had to depend upon speaking to the selectmen. I want to thank you all for doing this job. It's a hard job to do because you always have dissatisfaction with somebody. But I know what it is to redistrict. When we did it in 2002, my committee did it, 2003. But when the court did it, we had a real mix-up of towns. And I have seen the legislature go from Republican to all Democrat to Republican, so that it changes off. And I don't see people understanding our government. That's what I feel the strongest about. We really need more education in how New Hampshire's legislature, executive council, and governor work. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Warnock has also signed up from Hampstead.
Good evening, and thank you, senators and representatives, for holding this session tonight so that we can be heard. As mentioned, I am from Hampstead. I'm a taxpayer, a voter, and a selectman. I'm not here in my role as a selectman, however. I have to agree with my compatriot, Mr. Guthrie. Although we often are on opposite sides of a question, I think we do share a common goal, in that we both feel that Hampstead, as with many of the other communities, deserve their constitutionally guaranteed right to representation. As someone who ran for representative in the last session, I know how challenging it is to really master the needs of my own community, let alone trying to understand the needs of the communities adjacent. And while I don't envy the job of our senators, who have several communities they have to represent, I think we have really demonstrated with a population of over 8,000 that we don't share a school district with Kingston, we don't share any of our public safety entities with other communities. We are an entity in and of ourselves with our own needs. And so I hope that going forward, as Representative Guthrie mentioned, the tables do turn. And I think it's in all of our best interest to come up with a fair process that is transparent, that is, gives notice of at least 10 days of these public hearings so that the public is available to participate, that does allow the remote testimony because we know that there are still folks that are at risk in attending large gatherings like these, and that make the effort to really make this a public event, which I do appreciate when you mentioned it would be live streamed and that it would be recorded as well. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you for your comments. Signed up to speak is from Exeter is Skip Berrien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to see some familiar faces from this table, from my past experience. Thank you for your work to address the monumental task of creating social, economic, and political balance within New Hampshire. This is a dangerously polarized time for our state, and you have the opportunity, yes, you have the opportunity to address this fractured status by creating responsible and fair electoral districts in an open and transparent manner. Rockingham County has experienced considerable growth and transformation in the last decade, with changes in its population's social, economic, and political dynamics. In particular, I would like to address the needs of the Senate District 23, in which I live, and from which I served 3 terms in the New Hampshire House. The current district includes the towns of Exeter in the east to Chester in the west. These towns have divergent orientations, either toward the Salem I-23 corridor versus the seacoast of Rockingham County. If you could consider a redistricting of Senate District 23, I propose a plan that would acknowledge the social and economic realities of this part of the state. This plan would completely or almost completely include 3 large school districts, or SAUs, which are currently distributed among 4 Senate districts. This alternative district would also include major commercial centers located in Epping and Exeter, which are frequented by people in these towns. This alternative plan would take into account the natural affinities of the population in everyday life. Politically, District 23 has been dominated by Republican voters for decades. This alternative plan, by my estimation, would continue with Republican voter domination. However, by judging from the current House reps in these towns, there would be a slight increase in Democratic voters, thus contributing to a more equitable political division, what I think also should be a goal of redistricting. I offer this plan for your consideration, which maintains a stable population size within the district as you proceed with your deliberations in an open and transparent manner, as you've heard from so many people tonight. We hope that there will be time for public scrutiny and public comment as well. I acknowledge that you have many, many issues to consider. And in my plan, yes, you have to rob Peter to pay Paul, and that's going to be a difficult process for you all. But I thank you for giving this consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for people who didn't hear, this testimony will be online. He had specific towns that he proposed to change. for the Senate District. Jackie Grody, Representative.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to Rockingham County. And I thank you for the time that you spent listening to the citizens of New Hampshire. First of all, I'd like to correct a statement that was made earlier. Ryan Newcastle does not share a state representative. We have two. I am one, and Kate Murray is another. So that district has two representatives. To those watching, I have a question, and I think it's important if we can get the answer. Should those watching live stream want to send input to this process, what's the process for them to communicate their concerns or questions?
Thank you very much. I'll address that at the end. I forgot to do it at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. And then my hope is that public input is truly considered in establishing fair districts. And therefore I ask that maps are drawn and shared with the public with the intent that further public opinion is allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Heffron.
I did not sign up to speak.
Would you like to? Okay. Matthew Stoyer from Chester.
Well,
I see my bad handwriting has preceded me. It's Stover from Chester. Thank you for holding this listening session and for undertaking the important work of preparing a redistricting plan consistent with the Constitution and the laws of New Hampshire to ensure fair and effective representation for all citizens of Rockingham County and the state as a whole. My name is Matthew Stover. I've lived in Chester for 18 years, and I've been honored to serve our community on the school board, the budget committee, and the trustees of trust funds. On May 15th of this year, the Chester Town Meeting voters, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all the members of the Select Board passed unanimously an article to urge the New Hampshire General Court to carry out the redistricting in a fair and transparent way through public meetings, not to favor a particular political party, and to include communities of interest, and to minimize multi-seat districts. The article furthermore cited the New Hampshire State Constitution, Part 2, Article 11, allowing towns of sufficient population to have their own state representatives and not share with other towns, and directed the town to petition the General Court for its own exclusive seat in the House of Representatives. I'd like to speak specifically to why Chester should be provided with a dedicated representative. Chester currently is in Rockingham District 4, including Auburn, Chester, and Sandown, which have 4,953, 4,786, and 5,986 citizens, respectively. That's 15,707 in total. 5 representatives are elected to serve all 3 towns collectively. Since each town has more than the 3,444 citizens required for a dedicated representative, we hope it would be possible and in compliance with the Constitution to do so. With respect to Chester, as others have noted about their town, we are a unique community bound together by where we live and our common interest in supporting our friends and neighbors and the Chester way of life, far more than we are bound to any particular political party. We have long history and traditions. Next year, Chester will celebrate its 300th anniversary, and we work very much together as citizens and volunteers, whether to preserve our historic meeting house from the 1700s, support the quality of our schools, our roads and bridges, our conservation land, the quality of our water. But also we work together to keep our property taxes as low as we can. These are among the largest expenditures for most of our residents. Our state representatives and the decisions of the General Court and the state government as a whole have significant impact on the services and funding we receive each year to ensure our quality of life and determine how much our property taxes increase or decrease. The fact that this is largely controlled, significantly controlled by the state and not the town, is what we call in Chester the New Hampshire disadvantage.
It is important to have a dedicated representative who is always focused on the impact votes and decisions in Concord will have on our Chester priorities and our local taxes. A dedicated representative from the Chester community will also be able to focus just on the citizens of Chester, the 4,700, rather than more than 15,000. Gene Sharon, who was one of our former state representatives, spoke at our town meeting about his experience trying to represent the district. He noted that representatives perform a lot of work that people don't see for individual constituents. It's very important, but it's also very time-consuming. He noted that Chester qualified some years ago for a single representative, and that when he served, it was a stretch for him to serve all the representatives across the 3 towns. He noted the Chester community needs a representative who will have the time and the interest in the town to answer people's phone calls and return them and act on their behalf. I expect the residents of Auburn and Sandown and other towns without dedicated representatives feel the way people in Chester feel. Each town is unique. We are focused in New Hampshire on the community in which we live, not on the state or not on the national politics. It's the community where we live, and we will benefit from a dedicated representative to help in the State House to promote our views and to hold the state government accountable for taking actions to help control our local property taxes. Along with the other citizens of Rockingham County, I look forward to the opportunity to review and comment on the redistricting proposal from your committee when it is complete, and I hope you will decide to provide dedicated representatives for Chester and other qualified towns. I thank you for this opportunity and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I have someone else from Chester here to speak on, I just copied your name down, Dara Theodos? Not even close, it looks like.
Dana Theodos from Chester, thank you. Obviously, my penmanship is also poor. I appreciate elected representatives where it is a professional job with a volunteer's salary. And each of the volunteers here are responsible to their own community. When I look around, I see a specific demographic on where you are, but also behind me, where people like myself and younger are not represented here. And that is a large part because of the responsibilities that we have that are pulling us in different directions. However, COVID and the emergency rulings allowed in our community for online meetings, and that allowed for increased participation. And I would ask that this committee consider a more inclusive opportunity for a more diverse group to speak to you. In Chester, we have a small community, a very active community, and we meet our representatives at town fair, at the transfer station, at election day. This is an opportunity for us to speak directly to our representatives. And if we do not have someone in our exact community, we don't have direct representation. And that is something that, as a New Hampshire resident, we should have. I also do really look forward to the opportunity after the maps are drawn to have a second public comment to discuss the reasons that you've chosen to place the communities together. Thank you.
Thank you. Ericade Veers from Hampton?
She had to leave.
She had to leave. Thank you for letting me know. Christy St. Laurent.
Good evening. My name is Christy St. Laurent. I'm from the town of Windham. I'd like to thank the committee for giving the opportunity for people to share our thoughts with you as you are entering into this process. The town of Windham did pass a warrant article where the vast majority of the town requested that this committee would go through this process in a fair and transparent manner and in a way that is respectful of not just the geographical divides, but or geographical locations, but also the many varied interest groups that make New Hampshire such a great place to live. I would like to speak up to request that you do acknowledge and make possible for each town that is eligible to have its own state representatives. Windham in the last redistricting was separated from Salem, and when you look at them population-wise, Windham was very much dwarfed, and it continues to be very much dwarfed by our next-door neighbor. And by having your own representatives from your own town, you get the opportunity to rub elbows with them, as was said, at the transfer station, at the grocery store, local restaurants. And it really provides a two-way street of information. A lot of people, believe it or not, don't sit and watch all the broadcasts of every committee meeting, but it gives the opportunity to say, hey, what's going on in Concord and how does that relate to Windham? As well as if there is something that you want to speak up about. A lot of people, although you guys are all very nice, are hesitant to go speak publicly. But it does give them that opportunity when they see their representatives around town to be able to give that input. And so that two-way street kind of works its way up the ladder as well for the state senate districts, for the executive council districts, and as was mentioned, executive council district 2 is crazy. If you look at the way it goes all the way across the state, very diverse regions that it represents and very, very different issues that the different areas of the state are going through. I can't even imagine trying to wrap my head around all of the issues across that whole district. So I would respectfully request, as you go through this process, that you do recognize the number of towns in New Hampshire that did pass the warrant articles and in that way spoke directly to you and the rest of the legislature in redistricting in a way that is fair and transparent, reflective of our state and our demographics, and without gerrymandering. I would also like to ask, too, that in this process that the maps are made available both to the legislature that's going to be voting on them, but also to the public with enough time for careful consideration before the votes are made so that further input can be made. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Also signed up to speak from Greenland, an A. Passer.
Hello, my name is Alice Passer. I'm a physician. I live in Greenland. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the group. I simply want to say that I hope that you take your job seriously as far as free and fair redistricting according to the state constitution. I also would like to echo what other speakers have said about the importance of transparency and giving the public a chance to see what you've created after you've done so, to review and comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Also signed up to speak, I have Trish Titt from Kingston.
Hello, I'm Trish Tipp. I am a lifelong resident of Kingston. Just a couple things on the numbers. Kingston and Hampstead are grouped together as our district. We are not equal. Kingston is actually smaller than Hampstead by quite a bit. Hampstead is about 1/3 larger. So our representatives having an agreement between themselves to have 2 from each town actually does the town of Hampstead a disservice, because if we just went on the votes, they would have more of a say than Kingston does. So unlike what the representative claimed. There also is no way to guarantee equal representation. It's just an agreement between the current 4 reps that we have. I ask that both of our towns do qualify for our own representative. Our 2 towns, they have very different needs and concerns, They're part of different school districts. They don't have a whole lot in common beyond that. And like one of the other people said, we don't share any public facilities or anything like that. Both towns do qualify, and they both qualified in 2010 as well, so we have a history of having that population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for speaking. Maureen Delakian from Salem? Oh, actually, so what happened is you signed up, you said yes or no if you wanted to speak, and I'm going through the question marks now. So let's see if they made up their minds. Phyllis Mackey from Newfields, it looks like?
Thank you very much. Yes, I was a question mark. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, representatives and senators. And I would also like to say thank you to everyone here, because I think with everything we've seen this week, there have been a number of examples of a lack of civility at some hearings and political things. And I just want to say, I was a little worried coming here today going, oh, is this going to be okay? And I just want to say thank you to everybody here for being professional and civil. Thank you. And there have been so many people who have spoken before me who are much more eloquent than I, and I would just like to echo that I too support having a nonpartisan, independent body to help with redistricting, to make it fair, transparent, and without gerrymandering. And I too would like future hearings to have a remote option and additional public hearings after the maps are redrawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for making up your mind to speak. Victor Heleno?
Victor Hellenic. Hello, guys. Thank you for coming out today and taking time. I'm sure you all got day jobs or responsibilities, and here's yet another job representing us here in the state of New Hampshire. I'm from Salem, and my point in just getting up to speak is that I believe in voting. I am the ballot taker in one of the districts in Salem, and I have been for the last 3 elections, the primary, the general, and then the town. And I volunteered for that because I have firmly believed in voting as one of the things that we can do as Americans. And I've always believed in that from as a child. Now here in Salem, I've been given a chance to participate in that. So that's the one thing, as I mentioned, I believe in, but it is, our country has so very little of us. We have to pay taxes, and they ask that we vote. And everything else is pretty much voluntary after that. And because I believe in voting, we need to make sure that voting remains desirable, a function to do, something that you want to contribute to. And as part of the redistricting effort here, hopefully that can bring more people in and know that their votes do actually count, because it is one of the fundamental tenets that makes our country so much different than others around the world. So. And there's been many others that have spoken before me here with wonderful points, all of them, and I can't add to that. But this is a bigger, broader picture about the importance in general of voting and our collective responsibility in that. And really, I thank you all for taking the time out of your lives to do this for us, to represent us in this. Madam Chairwoman, representatives, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and speaking. I also have a Kevin Frumless. Oh.
Good evening, folks. Madam Chair, members of the committee, appreciate your work tonight. My name is Kevin Fleming. I live in Exeter, but I've been teaching government and history for a number of years in Hampton. And I'd like to go back and recall or at least acknowledge you've had a number of thoughtful comments and observations tonight. But I'd like to go back to the notion, and maybe in the historical context, of gerrymandering. There is a cynicism, may I sadly tell you, that is in the younger generation that speaks to the notion that money and partisan politics have poisoned the elections and the governing. And on that basis, may I respectfully request that in your work, you avoid any and all accusation that gerrymandering is continuing. That is the signal that tells folks that things are not fair. So I'd like to ask you to be attentive to that, to be concerned with that, as you probably well are, but to be strong and to be fair and to avoid any accusations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Also signed up to speak tonight is Representative Deborah Osterlin.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you all for dedicating your time and talents to our state. Your efforts to be here in Rockingham County tonight, I know some of you have traveled a great distance, are much appreciated. I'll start by saying that these public hearings should be accessible to those who cannot attend in person, and the public needs the ability to testify remotely via Zoom. Had that opportunity been afforded tonight, I would be testifying via Zoom. I understand this might not have been the decision of the committee and lies within the purview of the Speaker, the Honorable Sherman Packard, seeing as this committee is chaired by and has a majority of members from the Speaker's party. I would urge you to use that to your advantage and to our advantage and encourage a more accessible hearing format. 8 days ago, here in Rockingham County, the county convention met in person like this, without a remote option, and similar to tonight, many people have chosen not to wear masks to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. That night, nearly 60 people, the majority elderly, were exposed. There are members of the Rockingham County Convention whose health is too fragile to risk infection, and they should not be excluded from participation. There are members of my community of Stratham who also expressed interest in participation, but are of fragile health. And they thought at least they would be able to watch the live stream, but there isn't one tonight. In 2019, my town of Stratham, along with 30 other towns that year, voted at our annual town meeting on a warrant article stating that we support and demand an independent redistricting commission. That was an idea that was supported statewide, passed the House and the Senate, only to be vetoed by the governor last year. There are many of you on this commission tonight who voted for that independent redistricting commission. But we don't have that. And we find ourselves in the exact position we had all worked so strenuously to avoid, a partisan process. But we must embrace this process with an eye on fairness in our map drawing and to avoid the siren song of people who crow about redrawing the maps to give their party a geographical advantage. On behalf of the voters of Stratham, I respectfully ask this committee to consider the following. As voters and citizens, we have common interests with our neighbors, particularly with school districts and public services where they are shared. We ask that the maps reflect that and not break up school districts over multiple voting districts, and that they be grouped together to mirror our communities. We understand in Stratham that according to the latest census data, we will be allotted our 2 representatives and have representation most likely with another flotarial representative. We ask that that remain within our school district. Here in Rockingham County, there have been changes in populations to the towns of Nottingham, Deerfield, Candia, Auburn, Chester, Atkinson, Plaistow, Hampstead, Sandown, Kingston, Newmarket, Seabrook, Greenland, and Rye. They should each have their own dedicated districts in this round. We ask that a correction to the Executive Council map be executed by this committee. The District 2, as it is known, the Dragon District, is nothing short of ridiculous and cynically drawn in its geographical scope. It is a poor reflection on us as a state that it was gerrymandered in that way, and we can do better. Why the cities of Rochester, Somersworth, Dover, and the towns of Durham, Madbury, and Rollingsford are not in our district is a 10-year-old mystery. Perhaps this committee can solve that. We ask that the congressional map be reflective of the competitiveness that the maps have now. There have been only nominal changes in the populations of those current districts, and there should not be any drastic changes like the often bandied about idea of the rumored carving out of Manchester and allotting it to District 2. That would be unacceptable. And as for transparency, the public needs more notice for these public meetings. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they need to be accessible to everyone. And finally, the minute the draft maps are finished, we need to have digital accessibility. The public needs digital accessibility to those draft maps. And we ask you to please come back here to wonderful Rockingham County for another round of statewide meetings to repeat an opportunity for the public to put input into your work product. I really thank you for your time and dedication to this laborious task that will either produce manipulated maps that reflect the ideologies of a singular party, or fair maps that reflect the true New Hampshire in the fairest way we can be. Thank you. I will email my testimony to you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here tonight who would like to speak?
Come on down, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mark Balone. I'm from Epping. I want to thank you all for coming to Brentwood so that we get a chance to speak to you tonight. And for the purpose of being quick, 2 points I'd like to just make, which have been made tonight. It seems to me that having a representative in your town, if you have the population, is one of the key things that you can do as a committee. Listening to Deerfield, my heart broke in regards to just seeing how that town has been deprived of all its representation in terms of having a real opportunity to have someone speak just for Deerfield when they have the population that is constitutionally meeting its requirements. So I really hope that you will do that. And the second thing is to repeat, I don't know how many of you have written something, but you know the first draft could always use a good set of eyes to look at it. So let people see that first draft and get that feedback. Because you've heard a lot about gerrymandering. If we're really addressing that issue and we're being fair, then that first draft ought to sail right through. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I see a couple of hands. I believe you spoke earlier. Let me recognize the woman in the back who I don't think has spoken before, then the gentleman with his hand up in the hallway there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Catherine Haraki. I live in Hampton.
I'm sorry, could you give us your name again?
Yeah, Catherine Haraki. I live in Hampton. I had to write this down. Is Congressional District 1, Senate District 24, House District 21, and Executive Council District 3. So quickly, when I ran for office for the first time last spring, I had to call the state. I had to call the Secretary of State and ask, do I really have to put my street address, my personal address on all my signs that I put in the public? I thought that was kind of made me a little uncomfortable. And the secretary told me, well, that is the regulation. It's from a remnant in time when we expected our constituents to come up to our front porch and talk about issues. So The front porch is no longer the main source of communication between you and your constituents, and neither should a closed room like this. So I think, please, when you go ahead and talk about the next steps, keep in mind, what are you doing? Are you doing it because it's a remnant of something in the past? And what is your real goal? And we have a lot of tools. We have telephones, we have Zoom, we have email, we have two-way communication, lots of other options besides front porches. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, if you want to come on up.
How's it going? I'm Mark McLaughlin from Northampton. So I sort of got involved with this sort of, as I'm an independent voter, worried about where democracy is going, and you've heard all the stuff, but I think the major points I wanted to make. But my main thing was how much I learned working with Open Democracy on trying to draw some maps that looked fair, and how much the devil's in the details and in the weeds. And I felt I was a pretty educated voter, and then I realized how much I wasn't. And I think that's all the more reason why it's going to be really important that when these maps are drawn, initially they are shown to people and somewhat explained as much as they can. To me, the most important thing is that the districts are competitive. At the congressional level, the executive council, all of those. And to be honest, the 2010s actually had that, fairly competitive across the board. That's something I certainly want to see maintained. And I think the more this can be out there and shown to the public, and I appreciate having this listening session, I think that's going to help New Hampshire voters stay involved. And I hope that you'll strongly consider having the maps, once they're preliminarily drawn, for at least some type of comment. I know it's a lot of time, energy, and resources to do it again, but I think it may help get more people involved, which is what we need to do. So thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Are there other persons here tonight? Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, come on.
I'm Kay Galloway. I'm from Atkinson, which is Rockingham County District 14, which is comprised of Atkinson and Plastow. I do note that Representative Norm Major is seated behind me, but I think he will agree that each of our towns is deserving of its own representative. Each of our towns is right about 7,000 residents, and we have about 5,500 voters in each town. I add my voice to those who have echoed it loud and clear that we need independent districts if we've met the criteria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for adding that tonight. Is there anybody else who, come on, start.
Also wanted to thank you all for being here. Eric Turr from Brentwood. I've run a couple of times for the House in a flotarial district. I guess my point, and maybe it sounds a little on the technical side, I totally agree with the idea that have been put forth about keeping school districts together, about trying to keep demographics and other groups aligned as possible, while balancing the equal representation. And I also agree that it's almost impossible to know what makes towns similar. I guess my one thought would be, and my working world use GIS a lot. I assume there'll be a GIS-based project that underlies this process. Rather than making the maps themselves the final results available, I think it would be great if you could make the underlying data that's going into these, all the elements that are being considered available to people in a format that they can look at and come to their own conclusions based on the same elements that you're going to consider in the end. And then in the end, that the districts that are created, to the degree that it's possible, reflect all those aggregated statistics that went into it so people can see the end result. And so that the feedback that they give, which again, I also agree a second round would be great, that feedback can be based on the same elements that you're working with.
Thank you. Anybody else here tonight? Ma'am, come on down.
Excuse me, thank you. I just thought of one more thing.
If you just want to say your name again for the record, I never.
Virginia Clifford.
Thanks.
From Canada. I was just thinking as the last person spoke of how confusing it is when you try to align and look at the districts that you're in for representative and senate and executive council and the confusing ways that they don't overlap. So I know that that's it's a very complex issue, but to the extent that they could align better, I think that would really help when just trying to look at elections as a whole. And that's enough. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Well, if that's the case, let the record reflect that you have a Rockingham County elected official who has actually declined to come to the mic in a public meeting. And that in itself is somewhat astonishing. Oh, now he took the bait and here he comes.
Madam Chair, could I just add that I believe that this is the chair of the Rockingham County delegation, if I'm correct, as well as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee and a very long time distinguished member of the New Hampshire House.
Well, thank you for that.
That might be, but we're still on the record, so you need to tell us who you are.
My name is Representative Norman Major. I represent the town of Atkinson and Plastow.
Thank you.
And I also, as chairman of the county delegation, I came here tonight to listen to the testimony. And from what I heard, there's great testimony. And then a constituent of mine from Atkinson, Kay Galloway, I agree wholeheartedly with her that we need to make as many single districts as we can so that these communities get their representation and they're not swamped and robbed of their representation by a larger community that they may be put with. Thank you.
Thank you. There you go. Teaming up they are. Anybody else here tonight? All right, I want to thank you all for coming, but before we close up, I want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, this meeting was live streamed, and it was working the entire meeting. That was verified. I don't mean to be rude when I was looking at my phone, but I'm doing various things, which include making sure that things are working, because you might suspect that sometimes we have technical difficulties, and we need to be aware of this. You also heard a lot tonight that people want remote access. Well, the reality is you have remote access to the committee members, all of you here or people at home. There are websites at the New Hampshire General Court page. On the home page for the General Court, there is a direct link to both the Senate Redistricting Committee and the House Redistricting Committee. If you choose to go to the various chambers, the Senate or the House, we are on the House side, the Special Committee on Redistricting, and on the Senate side, Senator Gray, what is your official title?
For the redistricting.
Senate Special Committee on Redistricting.
There you go. And
You're
there
not the person who set it up. Give the answer.
So there are links on the committee sites to each of those committees. This is the process you would use to look up any committee and its business at the State House. On the House side, once you get to the Special Committee on Redistricting, you will find various links there that will allow you to look at the materials we've been provided at committee meetings, watch our meetings, which are online from the YouTube recordings for you to be able to see it. You will have a link for you to email all members of the committee. It will have a link for you to submit testimony. It has a link for you to submit suggested maps. You can look and see what people have submitted. There are some maps up there right now that people have submitted for consideration for the committee. So, and you will be able to look there tomorrow, actually, to see the video of tonight's meeting. So we are trying to provide as much remote access as possible, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. We certainly appreciate your comments and your appreciation and your participation in this, and appreciate it greatly. And drive safely. Have a good rest of your evening. Representative Weber.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I had only one question, which is I know that our schedule has been somewhat disrupted, but do we have any idea when we will actually have maps for people to look at that are the committee's maps?
There is nothing scheduled right now on that, and I, as a matter of fact, was hoping to hear last week at our meeting that people were working on maps and when they were going to be done, and I didn't hear from anybody, but we'll be working on that schedule. Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming tonight.
Before the Senate closes their hearing, I can't talk to the committee members individually because of RSA 91A, and I just wanted to, for the Senate members, that if you look at the maps that were provided by Mapathon, that they make a significant change in Manchester into 2 districts instead of the sharing of the outside communities, because I think Manchester comes in very close to the ideal number, breaking it into 2. They also break Nashua into 3 districts, because I believe that you can't really do Nashua and get within the right percentages. You're +7 if you do that. And then down into the executive council one, they list it as a pro that Manchester, Nashua, and Concord are all in separate districts, where I would think that they would be communities of interest. So our first meeting, that's a couple of the first things that we will take up, and we will schedule those meetings as soon after we finish the hearings. If one of them, like Belknap or whatever, hangs out, we may actually have a meeting before that. But again, just Senate business, so that I've done it in public, so I don't violate RSA 91A. So. All right, thank you. And with that, I close the
Thank you,
Senate part.
everybody. Have a safe trip home.